Hello and good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be with you at Globoil, but unfortunately only by Zoom. I think I have participated in every Globoil conference in India from the time it started. But this year, unfortunately, for personal reasons, I have not been able to come to India, to Agra, beautiful city, and be with you in person. But I'm going to share my thoughts and my outlook by Zoom. And I hope it will give you as much pleasure and knowledge as it would have done had I been with you in person. So let us get started. First, by congratulating TEFLAs and SEA for this Silver Jubilee year, 25 years of Globoil. What a wonderful occasion and what a wonderful history and wonderful record. And my congratulations to the two people or three people who have been there right from the beginning. Kailash, Bharat Bhai, Sandeep Bajoria. I'm not sure if Atul Chaturvedi has been there right from the beginning. It looks like he also was there, but my memory fails me. But all the other people who have been associated with Globoil, congratulations and thank you for your support. I am dedicating this paper today to the memory of my wonderful friend who we all miss and who was a permanent feature of Globoil and SEA, the late Govind Bhai Patel. He is sadly not with us today. I'm sure he is with us in spirit, if not in the flesh. But this paper is dedicated to his memory. This is a great partnership between SEA and TEFLAs. And as I say in my slide, as interesting as the Taj and as symbolic of endless success as the Taj. How did we get so bullish this year? I'm not going to bore you with too many statistics of what happened in the market and what is the situation. That is done by my very distinguished colleagues, the other analysts who make presentations and who speak to you. And I'm sure in the paper just before mine, my friend Nagaraj Mehta has already covered information in minute detail, which is his specialty. And he gives you a very good panorama of the world situation that you need to know. So thank you, Nagaraj. And I will move on to the more enjoyable parts of commentary on the world situation. We got so bullish because of two successive La Nina in South America. And this year, we have a third La Nina. This has happened in the last 100 years only twice. This is the third time that we have a triple La Nina. And that makes the price outlook more interesting. But as I said, I am concentrating on the last year. Why did we get so bullish? We had the unfortunate export levy, export tax, and finally an export ban in Indonesia. The most catastrophic blunder that the Indonesian government could have made. And sadly, they made it. We have great respect for the government of Indonesia. They have done wonders in nurturing the palm oil industry. But this decision of tightening up the levy, increasing the tax, and then finally banning exports was wrong. And Indonesian farmers are paying the price for it today. In Malaysia, we have a critical labor shortage, which means production, there are not enough harvesters to harvest the fruit. Production suffers. Again, Malaysian government, very proactive, very wonderful, really nursed the palm oil industry. And they need to get their act together. We need to see the Malaysian government at its usual efficiency to ensure that this labor shortage is taken care of. The final reason for this bullishness in the world was what I call the Biden biofuel agenda, the green energy agenda of the United States, which means vegetable oil being converted into biodiesel and renewable diesel. And this led to maximum demand in the United States. As a result of the La Nina, the last La Nina, we lost 20 million tons of soybean production in South America. And we lost 7 million tons of canola production due to drought in the Canadian prairies. And the canola was very serious because in a total production of 22 million tons, if you lose 7 million tons, that's a huge loss. And that led to huge rise in price of rapeseed oil. Then the Indian government unfortunately panicked and kept cutting the import duty repeatedly. We in SEA and myself and commentators have tried to make Indian government understand that when you cut the import duty, the Indian consumer does not get the benefit of the import duty cut. When the import duty goes down, the producers in the producing countries raise their prices immediately. So 50% of the import duty cut goes as an extra profit to the manufacturers, the producers in Malaysia, Indonesia. The Indian consumer at last only gets 50% of the benefit, if at all. Sometimes he only gets 25% of the benefit. So that is why import duty cuts should be the last resort, and the government should not cut import duties. But governments are lazy. Cutting an import duty by issuing a notification is very easy. So they take the easy way out. They raise duties, cut duties, try and show their authority, but they do not realize the amount of damage they are doing to the industry. I say this with good feeling, because by and large, the Indian government manages its policy very well, very wisely. But sometimes they need to listen to well-wishers, particularly from Solvent Extractors Association. Solvent Extraction Association is not a lobby of importers. It is an association of manufacturers. More people manufacture than import. So it is not in their interest to lobby for importers, and that needs to be recognized by the government. Then there was conflict in the Black Sea region, the Ukraine war, and that led to super bulls in crude oil and natural gas. You remember Goldman Sachs and all these people talking about crude oil at $150 a barrel, $200 a barrel. And finally, there was this aggressive QE, printing of money by the US Federal Reserve. So all these factors created a heady cocktail, a very strong cocktail of bullish news, which took markets to unforeseen high levels. And then a big correction. The correction started. I was lucky. I made a bearish speech on the 8th of June, and the market started falling from the 9th of June. So producers don't like me very much, but I'm always honest and tell you what exactly I feel like is going to happen in the market. The market forgot that the poor consumer, palm oil consumer, comes from poor countries like India, Pakistan, Myanmar, Bangladesh. He could not afford to consume vegetable oil at these high prices. So we had what we call demand destruction. Then the dollar started getting stronger as inflation concerns surfaced and interest rates started rising. Strong dollar again hits purchasing power in the developing world. Finally, an export corridor was created through the Black Sea. So Ukraine, where all the sunseed, sun oil, wheat was blocked, was able to free up and export. And finally, the most bearish factor was that the Fed, the Federal Reserve in the United States, has moved from quantitative easing to quantitative tightening. They are draining liquidity from the market. So 6 months ago, 1 year ago, they were printing money to create liquidity. Now they are draining liquidity from the market. As a result, there is less loose cash available for speculation. That brings me to the current scenario. Interest rates are rising and some sort of a recession is on the cards in USA and Europe, definitely in the early part of next year. As I said, the Fed is draining liquidity and will reduce its balance sheet by $95 billion every month. That means over $1 trillion in 1 year. That's a big change. That's the huge amount of liquidity being sucked out of the market. So this double whammy of interest rates rising and liquidity being drained is required to tame inflation, at least to tame inflation the way it is calculated in the USA. In the US method of calculating inflation, in the European method of calculating inflation, food prices, fuel prices have very small weightage. Rents have very high weightage. Wages have very high weightage, and these items are notoriously difficult to control and reduce, which is why inflation becomes long-term. My hunch is that equity markets, which are concerned about the current scenario, will only bottom towards the end of October this year. China, the engine of growth for the whole world economy, is going through a weak patch. The Chinese economy may grow very, very shabbily this year. High energy prices causing severe difficulty in Europe, particularly in winter and next year. As I said, energy bills are going to be double for everyone. So when people have to pay more for energy, they have less to spend on other things. The developing countries are feeling the pain of high energy prices and the strong dollar. Just look around yourself. Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, all having dollar difficulty. They don't have dollars to pay their bills. They can't import. So where are they going to import large quantities of vegetable oil? And finally, OPEC and Saudi Arabia are playing a very dangerous and destructive game by reducing their production. They are threatening to reduce production to keep prices high, just when the world is going through very difficult times and we need lower prices. So I think OPEC and Saudi Arabia are doing a big disfavor to the world. The big gorilla in the room is the US Federal Reserve. What is the Fed going to do? We have seen Fed raise interest rates this week. Will the Fed be able to deliver a soft landing? A soft landing, we mean that they don't have to raise interest rates too much and inflation starts coming down. In my opinion, the chances of a soft landing are minimal. Can inflation be lowered to 2% without a recession? No, I don't think so. A recession will definitely come. Are asset prices too high? Yes. Despite the drop in equity markets, they could drop further. Asset prices, property prices are going to go lower. The difficulty is with wages. Wages in the Western world cannot be just reduced by the movement of a hand. For every one unemployed person in the US, there are 2 job vacancies. So how can you reduce wages? The same is the situation in the UK, in whole of Europe, labor shortage, manpower shortage. People have taken early retirement. So wage increases may moderate, but wages will always keep going up, and that is inflationary and not good for the world economy. Now, having made comments on the macro economy, I'm coming to palm oil production, specific to this industry. Malaysia will produce, in my opinion, 18.2 to 18.5 million tons of palm oil in 2022. Earlier, my estimate was 19 million. Now, because of labor shortages, etc., I have reduced that estimate. But Indonesia is firing on all cylinders and will produce about 3 million tons more than last year. In Indonesia, as you know, we always take a relative factor because no one is sure what the actual production of Indonesia is. So we take the delta. And the delta, in my opinion, is going to be 3 million tons, 2.5 to 3 million tons more. The cost of production is going up for sure, but the overall world production will still go up because of high prices by at least 3 million tons. Some comments on Indonesia. As I said, Indonesian government made a huge mistake by banning the export of palm. They had problems of high prices locally. They had shortage of palm oil local economy. Why? Because the combined export tax and export levy on palm oil was almost $550 a ton. That was a mistake. You were ripping off money from the palm oil industry. That led to local shortages, smuggling, and very high local prices. And then to mitigate that situation, the government of Indonesia put a ban on exports. As a result of the ban, Indonesian palm oil stocks are very high, and Indonesian growers are suffering now. So my advice to the Indonesian government and I have discussed this with them on numerous occasions, is you need to remove all export taxes and levies until 31st December. They have removed levies up to the end of October. Export taxes have been reduced. These are steps in the right direction. But if they remove them completely up to 31st December, they will boost exports and bring down local stocks to normal levels. Indonesia must also remove the completely dreadful policy of what is called the domestic market obligation. Remember, and this is something that Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand must all keep in mind. Today, palm oil is very competitive. It is lower than soybean oil on a CNF basis by $250 to $300. In some cases, $350 a ton. But that is the situation today and in October, November. In 2023, palm oil is not going to be as competitive as it is today because soybean oil prices are going to come down because of huge crops expected in South America. That brings me to rapeseed. There has been a big recovery of production of rapeseed and canola seed in 2022. As I told you, in Canada alone, production is going to be up by 5 to 6 million tons because of good rainfall. In India, mustard seed production in 22-23 will be even higher than the record production of 21-22 because farmers have done extremely well. High prices have rewarded them beautifully, and we have been very lucky with our monsoon. And if there is any ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict, that will dramatically improve the flow of rapeseed from Ukraine and Russia. Let us look at soya. I feel the USDA has been very aggressive in trimming the US soya crop. 2 weeks ago, they reduced the yield from 51.9 bushels per acre to 50.5. That's a huge drop. And they also reduced the planted area. I think they have been too aggressive, and actually in the October report, in the November report, in the December report, they will revise the crop higher once again. The one bullish factor for soya is the extension of La Nina for a third consecutive year. That is a bad omen for South American soybeans. But because of better genetically modified seeds and high prices in local currencies, remember the Brazilian real and the Argentinian peso are very weak. So because of high prices in local currencies and better seeds, we still expect record production in South America. And that brings me to sunflower seed, which is most affected by the Ukraine war. Will the export corridor continue? Mr. Putin is blowing hot and cold, but so far the export corridor works. Let us hope that it will work. I have been writing that the conflict in Ukraine must end before Christmas because Russian troops will want to go home for Christmas. Mr. Putin has to take his boys home for Christmas. If he doesn't take them for Christmas, they will go on their own. And that means they will refuse to fight, surrender. And as they did recently in Kharkiv, they even went off in bicycles wearing plain clothes so that they are not identified as soldiers. The Russians have a problem in Ukraine, and I expect that hostilities will decelerate, will go down as Christmas approaches. And that should enable more planting, more exports, more production. Things should get better with sunflower oil. And remember, already sun oil is competing with soya oil. Sun oil is a much better oil, normally commands a premium. But today, CNF India, it is slightly cheaper than soya oil. So Indian imports of Sunseed will go up at the cost of soya oil and palm oil. Some comments on China. China is in the grip of a slowdown. China may not be the steam engine for world growth anymore. And the China factor may not be seen as a bullish factor anymore this year. What about India? India, as I told you, has been very lucky with the monsoon rains this year. There is a little problem on rice, but by and large, oilseeds have done very well. And the extended rainfall, it is still raining, will benefit mustard seed plantings in Rajasthan, UP, northern India. Inflation is still a problem. Food prices are very high, but consumption growth has recovered. And at the same time, with production of oilseeds, production of vegetable oil is also expanding. So far, the weaker Indian rupee has kept local oilseed prices high, but they are now gradually coming down as the harvest, soybean harvest is approaching, planting of mustard seed is approaching, local prices are coming down. If world prices fall further, will the Indian government raise import duties? We will have to see. And finally, the TRQ, tariff rate quota on sun and soya oils in India is in a mess and it needs to be sorted out. Unused TRQ must be surrendered and redistributed to those who have fully used up their quota. This is my estimate of Indian imports, and I am grateful to my friend late Govind Bhai and his organization GGN. They still do wonderful work on Indian statistics, and our statistics, I always check with them and we correlate them. And you can see that I am expecting that in 22-23, India's imports will be slightly lower than in 21-22. Why do I think that? One big reason, India is importing too much in August, September, and October this year. So end October stocks, which are the opening stocks for next year, will be very high. And that is one of the reasons why we will import less next year. Plus, of course, our production of soya, rape, palm in India is going to be better next year than this year. So I expect soya imports to come down slightly, sun oil to recover, and palm to remain more or less stagnant. Now we come to the SNDs, the world supply demand factors. World energy demand grew in 21-22 by 1 million tons, mainly because of very high prices. This world energy demand refers to biodiesel demand. 22-23, we further project increase in energy demand due to capacity expansion, mainly in the United States, renewable diesel, but only to the extent of 1 million tons because there is a possibility of a worldwide recession. Now, at this point, I want to make some comments on this almost ingenious idea of the Americans and the Europeans to put a cap on Russian oil. It is to deprive Russia of hard currency and to put pressure, economic pressure on the Russians to end the war in Ukraine. Notable idea. In my opinion, a cap on Russian oil will definitely work, and there is no need for skepticism on whether it will work or not. Lower crude oil prices are in the interests of all developing countries and all democracies. Price fixing by OPEC is almost illegal. You find all OPEC countries saying, oh, cap on Russian oil will not work. All the bullish analysts saying it will never work. Try it out. If all the European countries, all the United States come together and put a cap on Russian oil, it will work. Give me one good reason why any country will want to pay more than the cap. Buyers are not fools. Consumers are not idiots. Why should they pay higher prices? They will have a perfect excuse to say, oh, our hands are tied. There is a cap. Even India and China, Russia's friends, even today they are squeezing the Russians. At $100 a barrel, they are only paying them $60 or $70 a barrel. So if the cap is $60 or $70 a barrel, do you think they will pay more? They will try and squeeze the Russians even more and try and get it for $50 a barrel. So I think a cap on Russian crude oil and gas exports will work if implemented. And this is a big threat to energy prices and should bring good news to consumers, particularly in India. Let us look at world food demand. World food demand for veg oils grows at about 3 million tons annually. 21-22 world food demand grew by 1.5 million tons due to very high prices. 22-23, I believe world food demand will expand again, but only by 2 million tons, because there is plenty wrong with the world economy at the moment. So what is the net effect? The net effect is that last year demand grew by 2.5 million tons. This year we expect demand to grow by 3 million tons. And here is my incremental S&D. This is the way I calculate price outlook. If you look at 21-22, total supply went up by 1.5 million tons. Demand went up by 2.5 million tons. Not a big difference. Shortfall of only 1 million tons. But prices doubled. Why? Because this increase in supply of 1.5 million tons did not actually materialize. Supply increased, but it was blocked. It was blocked in the Black Sea because of the Ukraine war. It could not come out. It was blocked in Indonesia because of the export ban. They could not export. So this 1.5 million tons increase in availability was on paper only. In actual fact, there was a huge shortage. In 22-23, we are showing total supply up by 6.5 million tons and demand up by 3 million. So there is a surplus of 3.5 million. But in actual fact, the surplus is going to be much more, because all the supply that was blocked in 21-22 in Ukraine, in Indonesia, is all going to come back into the market. So this is the S&D based on production. In actual fact, the surplus is going to be much higher, and that is why I am more bearish than most analysts. Now, let us look at price performance so far. Most analysts for vegetable oil as well as for crude oil were extremely bullish for the whole of calendar year 2022. It took courage for me to say in March that prices will fall dramatically post Ramzan and they will go below. Prices were ruling in March at 7,500 ringgits. And I said at that time they will go below 5,000 ringgits by the end of June and below 4,000 ringgits by the end of September. What actually happened? Well, on 8th of June, I amended my forecast saying palm oil futures will fall to 4,000 ringgits by June, July. And they actually fell. By end of June, prices were below 4,000 ringgits. I am on record as saying, and I repeat my price outlook forecast today, that Bursa Malaysia futures on the third position will fall to 3,000 ringgits by the end of September. That means in 1 week's time. And will further fall to 2,500 ringgits by the end of December 2022. 2,500 by December 2022. Why am I so bearish? Well, firstly, production in most producing countries is recovering strongly, and we have seen demand destruction due to very high prices. Secondly, recession in the major economies. And thirdly, the major markets for palm are all in the developing world: Africa, India, Bangladesh, China, Myanmar. And all these countries except India have got problems of payment, problems of a high dollar, various other infrastructure problems. So these economies have become weak and they cannot be expected to have strong demand. Recently, IOI, which as you know is Malaysia's biggest palm oil company, announced in their annual report. They publish a beautiful annual report. Unfortunately, not many of you read it. And they said that after labor shortages, after wage increases, higher fertilizer costs, their cost of production of crude palm oil is now 2,100 ringgits. Now, IOI is an efficient producer. Remember the law of economics. In bear markets, prices usually revert to the cost of production of inefficient producers. And the cost of production, if IOI costs 2,100, inefficient producers, the cost will be 2,500. And the function of the market is to put those inefficient producers out of business. That is why I feel that 2,500 ringgits is a good target and a good support level for prices next year. Is there a possibility of an uptick? I believe equity markets will bottom out by the end of October. The Fed, however, will not go easy on interest rate hikes because they need to re-establish their credibility on inflation. The political compulsions to go easy just before the US midterm elections in November are absent now. The Democrats are doing reasonably well. So there is nothing to stop the Fed from going the whole hog and increasing interest rates and breaking the back of inflation. Once markets realize that inflation has been conquered, we are likely to see a recovery in equity markets, possibly in the last 2 months of the year, nearer Christmas. But that rally in equities may be somewhat subdued because remember, there is recession in most of the Western countries. And hence, commodity price recovery will also depend on the US dollar and will take time. Let's quickly look at Lauric prices. Laurics are much more linked to economic growth. So with recession coming, they are going to resume their slide and go down to about $1,000 CIF Rotterdam. And my only other comment is that coconut oil is very attractive in price and it should regain its premium over palm kernel oil. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, interest rates and recession are the key for next year. The 2022-23 outlook is down with a possibility of a recovery after December 22 in equities. Recovery in commodity prices will take time. Even if we say that all economic cycles these days are compacted and everything happens very soon. So be careful, take care, be cautious, and I tell you, you will need good luck and God bless as you never needed it before. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. So, Lucas, do you want a cup of tea?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
I'm good. Okay.